Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome to another How to Win video. It's a bit strange, I know.
Very strange, Justin.
This video's probably come out and they probably have already seen this, so they're not like going to be as weirded out as we are, but this is our first video with Travis sitting here for today. But today we're continuing our How to Win series, and we're going to be talking about card evaluation. So before we just dive in and talk about our specific example we have here today, in layman's term, Travis, what is card evaluation?
I mean, it's looking at a card and figuring out what it does and how good it is at doing that in comparison to other cards.
Yeah. So it's one of those things that when you're first starting out, you're going to be doing this anyway. Like, you're going to look at a card like First Aid and you're going to say, man, this makes me not die. That's great.
It is good.
But it's really not.
It sounds good.
This is what we're going to talk about, like the value of the different areas that you can evaluate a card and see where the value of that card is. Today we're going to be using Machete. We're going to be breaking down and evaluating Machete. It's a very good weapon that's in your core set or revised core set. And then the process that we use to break this card down, you can use for any card.
For the most part.
It'll just, like, there will be some things that change. Like, for example, like, we're going to be talking about like how this deals damage, and magnifying glass doesn't deal damage, but you could argue magnifying glass getting clues is like dealing damage to the game. Who knows?
Kind
That's
of.
just...
It's not doing damage that's the important part. It's like just what it does that you're comparing it with.
Yeah. So this process, as we said, can work about any card. So let's just talk about what does this card do in a vacuum? What does that phrase mean for people who might not understand what that means?
Well, you just read the card and you're like, what does this card do?
Yeah.
It helps you fight better.
Yeah.
You know, through whatever means that it has put on the card, like Machete in particular, it's got a fight action. It gives you +1 punch. That's already better than just a generic fight action. And sometimes it deals +1 damage, which is better than not +1 damage.
So what Travis is talking about is if we go even to the level that's just even more just the surface level, this commits for a fist, which is the commit symbol in the top left. It improves your fist +1 when attacking. It deals extra conditional damage, and that condition is actually important when it comes to card evaluation.
Yep.
It costs 0 XP, so it can be in your starting deck, and it's from the Guardian class. This is just like surface level what the card does. Going even deeper, the card costs 3 resources. It costs an action to play, which is a cost. That's why, it costs
that's why
one
card,
action.
like, if you look at other weapons that are fast, that's a bonus that something they do better than Machete.
It costs a card from your hand, which is another cost of the game, especially if you look at our understanding resources. I believe it's in that one we talk about it there.
Right.
It's in the playlist at the end of the video. We talk about why that actually matters for a card. It costs a hand slot, which is another thing you need to consider. And it also has the melee weapon and item traits, which usually...
2 of those are relevant.
They're relevant, and they're not really considered a cost, but they do have relevant part of the game.
One of them, actually they're all relevant now.
Yeah.
It's a bruiser.
Bruiser, yep, yeah. And they'll probably just keep getting more relevant as the game goes, too. We can go even deeper, though.
Yeah.
How many attacks are needed for the cost of the card to be paid for? So why is this important?
Well, we looked at our last little section. We looked at the cost of this card being 3 resources, the action to play it, the card itself, because like it could be a different card in your hand, and also like it takes another action to actually use it. So you need to look at how much you value. There's I don't have a definitive answer for this because it's hard to quantify how much like the +1 punch is worth. It depends on your difficulty, what's in the chaos bag, what other sort of fist boosts you have in play, that kind of stuff. But the +1 damage is pretty easy to strip out, where it takes the action that you're using to fight with Machete is an action you'd be using to fight anyway, so that one kind of cancels each other out. And it takes an action to play it, so you need to make up that action somewhere. +1 damage is like attacking another time. So
this is something that you actually see in our videos a lot. Bryn does this a lot. He really breaks down like the value of a card. Like if you look at even we did a list video recently, which was cards that make Bryn angry, or cards that Bryn wouldn't even play.
Yeah.
And he talked a lot about the value of the card and how much it would take for that card to be worth the cost paid for it. And like that's a big part of evaluating. It's like the deepest level of evaluation. Like even for me when I was making this and reading Travis's great script for this, I look at this, I'm like, I never think about this for a card, but it is good to sometimes get that deep when it comes to it. Like, it's less obvious for something like a weapon, as you
You
said.
just play the ones brand I tell you are good.
But like, it's one of those things that just like, it's really obvious when you get like cards that are like, you get something like Seeking Answers, level 0, right? Like, you notice it more, and then that's where it becomes easier to pay. But it even actually still translates into weapons. Let's compare Machete to some other cards, because this is also where the next level of evaluation comes in as well.
Yeah, because looking at a card, like, just what it does is, like, fine, but what really matters is how it does those things in comparison to other cards, and that's the decision you're really trying to make about whether a card's good or not, is whether it's better than other cards, is better than the sort of baseline.
Yeah. So Machete, as we said, 3 cost, 1 hand slot, no limit to the uses, which is also a relevant thing we didn't talk about there. +1 damage conditional, +1 fist. It has no upgrade, melee item weapon, and it has the fist symbol. We compare this to 45 automatic, which is a 4 cost, 1 hand slot, 4 ammo. So that means it has 4 uses, and if you need to find other ways to get more uses out of it, otherwise you only get 4 attacks out of it, miss or hit.
Yep.
+1 damage, +1 fist. It has an upgrade, item, weapon, and firearm for its traits, and it has the foot symbol. So just looking at these two, Travis, where's the evaluation difference for these two when you're just looking at them?
Oh, yeah, you look at the first thing that jumps out at you is like the 45 automatic costs 1 more. So it needs to do something to justify costing 1 more for you to play it. The other downside that it has compared to the Machete is that it has limited uses and it's 4 ammo. And you could argue that like the foot symbol is a downside compared to the fist symbol on the Machete, but that's a little bit more situational. So what does it do better to justify that limited uses and the 1 extra resource to play it? Well, basically it doesn't have conditional damage, is the big one, where you can just, every time you shoot with it, you're getting your damage. It doesn't matter how many guys you're engaged with, whereas Machete, if you get engaged to 3 guys, it might be in a bad place.
It becomes a very sticky situation. It does.
Yep.
Yeah.
The 45 automatic also has the firearm trait compared to the melee trait, which there are a series of upgrades that you can put onto it to make it better, improve it. The Machete does not have access to most of those. And the 45 automatic also has an upgraded version, which isn't inherently valuable, but there are some cards that care about that. For example, if you're playing Diana Stanley and like down the rabbit hole,
Yep.
you can get access to an easy card to shove into your basement.
Yeah. Now let's look at the 45 Thompson here. So this is 6 cost, 2 hand slots, has 5 ammo, so 5 shots, hit or miss, +1 damage, plus, it should be say +2 fist, but I wrote +1 because I'm an idiot. Has an upgrade, item, weapon, firearm, illicit for its traits, and it commits for a fist symbol. So a big thing, I'm just going to go back over here. It gives +2 fist for the attack.
Yeah, that's pretty important.
That is pretty important.
Yeah, so like, if you can bring up the next one again. Yeah, so compared to our other two, this one again costs more, and it takes up 2 hand slots instead of 1. So it needs to do something to justify both. This actually costs twice as much as the Machete and twice as many hand slots. So like it kind of doesn't have to be twice as good, but like it's got to be pretty good. It has 5 uses, which is better than the 45 automatic, but still worse than the limited uses the Machete has. It deals +1 damage, just flat. Again, it's the same as the 45, but better than the Machete's conditional. And it gives you +2 fist, which is better than the other two. Good. Again, that depends a little bit on which investigator you're playing, what other kind of cards you have in your deck and stuff like that, and what your chaos bag looks like. It does also have the upgrades. Again, situationally relevant. And it's an item, weapon, firearm, and illicit, so it gets the same benefits of the firearm trait that the 45 automatic does. And also, there's like some very minor illicit things that can go for it, but that's mostly for green investigators. We're looking primarily at the guardian weapons here.
Yeah.
Then it also commits for a fist, which is, again, better, arguably better than the foot on the 45 automatic.
Yeah. So, further evaluation of Machete, another thing you can ask is, what is this card's niche? So, Machete is a very general card.
Yeah.
This one is not like as focused. You look at some other cards that, like, you look at something like Dark Horse, where does this card fit? It has its own archetype. which is then going to lead into other cards. Machete is just a weapon that you can just chop with, and you can chop pretty efficiently with it. So it's just very general, but it's something that you should be asking when you're looking at the cards you're evaluating.
Yep. And when you're talking about this card's niche, like if we go back to the previous slide, it's niche compared to the other two. Obviously, there's more weapons in the game, but if you're looking exclusively at these three, the Machete only takes up 1 hand slot compared to the Thompson, and it has no limit to uses, so it is very good at plowing through a large amount of enemies rather than like a single big enemy, for example. Or if you intend to only have 1 weapon for the entire scenario. It's cheaper than the other two if you're playing other expensive cards in your deck. It only takes up 1 hand slot, so you can run something else alongside it.
Yeah, which is actually we're about to get to, because another thing that you want to do when you're evaluating cards is what does this card synergize with? So a pretty easy one is cards that boost your fist. You're going to be using Machete to fight, and if you have other things that make it easier to fight to make up for the only +1 that you can see that like the Thompson has more, you now have your Beat Cop, which is now you're getting even more fist. Overpower also helps because you're going to be attacking with it. That's your job with that's Machete's jobs, and that's what Machete's going to do.
Yep.
Also, cards that help find Machete. This is very important. If you want to take advantage of your Machete and use it to chop things, you're going to want to find cards that synergize with it that you can make sure you have it. So this is why Prepared for the Worst and Backpack are good, because this is what, as Travis says, the item synergy. That's the trait that actually matters here for Machete.
And the weapon trait.
And the weapon trait over there on Prepared for the Worst. This is also good because then this opens up that these cards now also synergize with Machete.
Yep.
Right? So you look at that as well. That's even kind of like cross evaluation.
It's getting a little more into deck building, but then that's like how you build good decks, right?
Yep.
You're playing Prepared for the Worst in your deck to find your Machete. You're like, oh, maybe I can play other weapons too.
Yeah. Cards that provide more damage. So there's something that we talk about a lot on this channel called the Asphalov hump, which is just that enemies have 3 health commonly, and most weapons deal 2 damage. Cards like Vicious Blow now means that you only have to spend 1 action to kill a 3 health enemy. Yeah, pretty simple there. Machete has unlimited uses, so how can you take that advantage of that synergy with maybe, for example, like a card like Reliable? So that you can attach to an item asset you control, which, as I said, is one of the traits here on Machete, and it gives it +1 when you resolve a triggered ability on the attached asset. So it's +1 to each of your skills. So now that +1 becomes a +2. And that might sound like small, but that actually can be a pretty big boost to make Machete a very reliable killing machine.
Yeah, that puts up there very comparable to the Thompson, but except it has unlimited uses and it's half the cost.
Yeah.
It will cost you an extra card for the Reliable, of course, but the reason that the Machete in particular synergizes with the Reliable is because of those infinite uses. You know, you stick the Reliable on and it's just better forever.
Yep, forever. Machete takes up a hand slot, so this is where you can use something like Bandolier to take advantage of the fact that you have unlimited uses for the Machete with damage that's conditional, that you can have another weapon that you can use to shoot things or kill things that you can't if you're engaged with multiple enemies. Yeah. So Bandolier is really nice for that. And then Machete kills enemies, which you can use Greta Wagner and Evidence, which have a reaction that trigger when you defeat an enemy. This sounds like pretty simple, but it's true. Finding this is just another level of synergy that Machete can provide you. Who can play this? This is another question that you want to ask whenever you're seeing a card. Investigators who can run level 0 Guardian cards. That's on the face value of people who can play Machete. Nice and simple.
A good example of this is compared to our other 2 options, the 45 Automatic and the 45 Thompson, is if you're playing Lily Chen, you can only play this one. So your options are significantly limited.
Yeah.
You'll be comparing Machete to the other melee cards that are at low levels, whether they're like Dragon Pole in Mystic or something like Blackjack, God forbid.
One of those cards that just never show up in our stuff. Yeah.
Yep. It's the only one I could come up with off the top of my head.
Yeah. No, it's the only one really.
Enchanted Blade.
Trench Knife.
Yeah, Trench
Enchanted Blade's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good example. Yeah. And then who wants to play this? Investigators who want to fight a single enemy at a time in the case of Machete.
To me, this is better in like a sort of Schizo Tool deck where you're playing more of a flex role as opposed to someone who, like Zoe, who's like giving me all the enemies all the time.
Yeah.
Right?
So like find like the perfect home for
or
it.
you need to have other investigators on your team, like a Rita or a Finn, who can pull enemies off you so you can deal with them one at a time.
Yeah, definitely. Sick. Well, that's like basically like the steps you got to take and the questions you should ask yourself when you are evaluating a card. I also suggest you try this method out on another card, like for example, like deduction is a great one to go with as well because we love that card here. And then you'll also discover more about cards if you can better learn to evaluate them. Because then you can look at this card and then, as we have now done, every time we see a new skill, we look if it's practiced or not.
Yeah.
Right? That's just, or innate in my case,
just things
right?
that you care about
Yep.
them.
Yeah. Anything else you want to add? I think we're good.
That's about it.
All right. Well, I just want to say a huge thank you to everybody who's watching. A huge thank you to all of our patrons. If this is your first time on the channel, consider liking and subscribing to this video. We release a new ARKHAM video every day of the week. Yes, I did not lie there. We release a new ARKHAM video every day of the week. It made me realize that in 2022, I'm like, we have to make 365 ARKHAM videos.
Well, here's one of them.
Here's one of them. Boom. Marking off my list. Thanks for watching. We're going to be back in a few weeks for another How to Win, where we're going to talk about mulliganing, which is probably one of the most daunting things when you're just starting the game out, apart from your first turn, which is going to be the most intimidating moment of ARKHAM you'll ever have. But mulligans...
You sure it's not when the gold priest shows up?
Yeah, it's also pretty bad. Yeah, it's also pretty bad. Thanks for watching, everybody. You guys have a good one. We love you, and as always, GG's.